The purpose of today's Power Breakfast is to look at long-term changes that are occurring now because of everything that's happened in the past year. So far this morning, we focused on changes that are happening because of COVID-19 and new leaders that have come to our community. Now we're going to shift our focus to the changes caused by the protests following George Floyd's death on May 25th last year. Soon after his death, protests in our community, cities around our country, and other parts of the world began to turn attention to police misconduct and other issues related to racial injustice. This led to some immediate changes. Locally, those changes included the removal of 2 Confederate monuments on 3rd Street, changing the name of Hugh McRae Park to Longleaf Park, and after a longer debate, adding an art installation that reads, "Black Lives Do Matter and Racism Now." To address longer-term issues, the City of Wilmington started a Rise Together initiative. New Hanover County created an Office of Diversity and Equity, and in a less public way, some leaders of Wilmington businesses began discussions on what role they can play. Today, we want to get an update on where these efforts stand and what we can expect locally going forward. For this discussion, we have with us today Huntley Garriott, the president of Live Oak Bank, Wilmington Mayor Bill Saffo, and Linda Thompson, who was appointed last summer as New Hanover County's first Chief Diversity and Equity. Let's please welcome them all to the stage. I'll now hand the discussion over to our moderator, Business Journal editor, Vicki Janowski.
Thank you, Rob. As Rob mentioned, a lot of our discussion today has been about what the new normal looks like after the pandemic. But we also wanted to make sure that we take time to discuss another watershed moment in our country and locally last year. And obviously, 30 minutes is not enough to get into an issue as broad and nuanced as race relations and race discussions in this country and in our region. But we thought it was important to take some time and do a check-in to see what's been happening in both the public sector and in our business community since last year and since the discussion really opened up widely. And as we can see from the headlines in Minneapolis this week, it's a discussion that is continuing and ongoing. So today we wanted to do that check-in, fill you all in for those who are here and watching us online on some of the efforts and discussions that have been going on. And keeping with the theme of this morning's talks, most importantly, talk about what happens next and where do we go from here. So just to start us off, Huntley from Live Oak Bank, could you kind of fill us in, and everyone on the panel, fill us in a little bit about what you guys have been doing from the business end of it, but also did the events of this summer and the conversations that were happening propel what was already being discussed at Live Oak, or were those diversity and inclusion efforts already happening?
Sure. Thanks, Vicki. Kind of both, right? So, Live Oak has had a pretty philanthropic sort of mission since Chip and others founded the company. Last year, we had set up a group called the Idea Roundtable here within Wilmington with other business leaders to talk about diversity, set up our own affinity group within the bank. I'd been focused on some more diverse recruiting efforts. But then when you think about sort of what happened over the last 18 months, you had, I think, first would be the release of Wilmington's Lie, right? The book that really shed light on a lot of the history here in Wilmington. And then you have the pandemic, which, as we've talked about, really sort of exposed some of the disparity of outcomes that occur in troubled times. And then you have, the events around George Floyd, and all of that just sort of catalyzed us, and I think a lot of corporate America, in terms of how they thought about their, obligation, and really sort of led to, a lot more that we're doing now that we can talk about.
Mayor Saffo, how about for Wilmington? What have the discussions been about this past year?
Well, I mean, looking at the disparity issues, obviously, I also want to recognize that I have here in the audience with me today, Councilmember Charlie Rivenbark, and also Councilmember Kevin O'Grady is also with us here from the city of Wilmington. But the city took an initiative to look at this Rise Together, to look at ways that we can break down the systemic walls of racism, opportunity for all of our citizens. We want to make certain that we value each one of our citizens. We want to look at ways that we can deliver services in a more equitable way. And our city staff has done a very good job in diving in to take a look at the things that we can do, particularly as a city, since the city's initiatives are service delivery, parks, recreation, transportation, police, fire, planning, all the things that make up what a city does, and make certain that we're doing everything in a way that everybody has an opportunity, and that we look for things that we can do in the community, in parts of the community that seem to have fallen behind. We definitely have a high rate of poverty in the city of Wilmington, and trying to figure out things that we can do from the city's perspective, but also working with our county counterparts and also our state representatives and our federal representatives as to things that we can do in regards to resources that we can bring to those parts of the community that need additional resources and help, and to make sure that we're distributing it equitably. We think that that's very important. The other thing that obviously with the George Floyd incident that took place in Minneapolis is make sure that all of our police officers have that implicit bias training, to make sure that we have transparency in our system, to make sure that we have the cameras on our police officers and our sheriff's deputies, in-car cameras, audio. In fact, the audio tapes that were picked up some of the discussions that some officers unfortunately were having, and gave us an opportunity to remove those officers as quickly as possible. I think that demonstrates to the community that we have a commitment to make certain that we're distributing equity, and we want to make certain that our police officers are doing a good job, because they do heroic work every single day. And we don't want to make certain that we taint all officers because of a few bad apples in any organization, and you will have that from time to time. But the other part of this, as Huntley alluded to, is the economic side of this. What can we do to make certain that we have those citizens that seem to have not have the opportunity to share in the prosperity of a community? What can we do as a community? What can we do as business to ensure that those folks have that opportunity? And that's going to be a lot longer discussion. It's going to take a lot longer time. I think that the city of Wilmington has made a commitment to take a look at this, just like we do a strategic 5-year plan, and to emphasize money and focus, and to also hire a person that will make certain that the city is on track to achieve those goals and objectives. So that's primarily what the city has done since this summer.
Okay, and Linda, like we mentioned in the intro, the county last summer created your office for, which didn't exist before, and hired you as its first diversity officer. So can you tell us a little bit about what you all as an office have been doing? And also, was that something that was being discussed before?
Certainly. Good morning. First of all, we realized that the George Floyd incident was just a catalyst. The volcano had been simmering for hundreds of years. And because the volcano had been simmering for hundreds of years, it was due to erupt. And so after you oppress people and discriminate people, and people are being killed all across this country unjustly, people get tired of it. And if you look at history, every 10 years or so, there is civil unrest. So our response at New Hanover County wasn't just about George Floyd. It was certainly something that happened prior to the George Floyd incident. County commissioners realized that something different had to be done, not just an initiative, but certainly we had to change the way we were looking at diversity and equity through the county's lens. And so not only did our county commissioners make a declaration that racism was a healthcare epidemic, but they decided then to create a diversity and equity policy for New Hanover County. And then they created the Office of Diversity and Equity. And last summer, I joined the staff of New Hanover County, and we now have a team of about 4 individuals that work exclusively looking at inequities, diversity, and inclusion internally and externally. And certainly one of the first things that happened when I entered the door, County Manager Chris Poudreau told me, every county employee must be trained. This is not an option. If you work for New Hanover County, you've got to receive implicit bias training. And so our office started that task, making sure that from the newest employee to even our elected officials, they receive training on implicit bias. Because of that, we've been able to work with community partners And we've been able to go to Rotary International and Med North and Smart Start and a number of nonprofits in our community and offer this training, and we're continuing to do that today. We've also instituted a number of initiatives through our diversity and equity assessment. We found that poverty was our *1 inequity in New Hanover County. And so we've established a poverty reduction task force to address that. And we're working with law enforcement. Deputies have received an implicit bias training program explicitly for law enforcement. So it's a daily work. We are now looking at it as a way of life, as a philosophy, as a mind change, because we realize programs change every day. But if we change our minds and we adopt a philosophy that diversity and equity and inclusion is now a part of the fabric of our organization, that's how we can move forward and things begin to change.
All right, I do want to talk a little bit more about the economic ties in these equity initiatives, but since Mayor Saffo and Linda, since you have both brought up the policing and police changes, one thing Mayor Saffo just mentioned was the audio that was caught of the 3 veteran officers last June, about 1 month after George Floyd's death, and the national coverage that received. Chief Williams, actually on his first day permanently on the job, fired those officers because of the speech that was reported. One thing I'm curious about, Mayor Saffo, is what image did that portray, or what kind of calls did you get in terms of, because that was a national story, and also, you know, with Wilmington's history, did that, you think, change the way people from outside view the area?
Well, obviously, it was a tough day for this community and for this city. And obviously, it was the first day on the job for Chief Williams to have to make that decision. Obviously, there was people that were saying, here we go again, see what I mean? We have officers throughout this country that are discriminating, and it was caught on tape. And but I believe that the community and the nation also recognized how swiftly Chief Williams and this city said, we're not going to put up with this. We're not going to just study this, or not study that, but give these officers an opportunity to have their day. We said, you're gone, and we're not going to put up with it. And that's, I think, sent a message, I think, to the city and to our citizens that we're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior by any officer that's out there defending and protecting us, each and every one of us, no matter who we are. And I think that was a very important statement that the chief made.
And so going back to the economic equality, because that seems like a common theme amongst all 3 of your organizations. Huntley, what are some things Live Oak is coming at the issue at it that way in terms of entrepreneurship and small business?
Sure.
area?
So yeah, that's definitely one key focus for us. Obviously, the background of the company is focused on small businesses, mostly on a national basis. And when the pandemic happened and we were able to provide some PPP loans to some local businesses, really saw that we had an ability to help influence maybe the small business community here. And there are so many great groups, you know, Tracy sitting there, and you know, Glenda Tate at Cairo Center, and a number of organizations that are doing a really great work trying to build up small businesses here. That we really committed to being a part of that. And so we have a team of people here locally. Last summer, you interviewed Chip, who said we were going to find some physical space downtown. We are, I think, signed a lease, maybe, hopefully today. But to really create sort of a resource hub that can bring together various groups and provide not only access to capital, which is critical, but also some of the other resources help with, you know, business planning. Should you be an LLC or a C Corp? How do you think about marketing and cash flow and all these other pieces of this sort of wraparound services that help small businesses thrive? So that's really what we're dedicated to doing on the small business front. We have another initiative nationally to look at, you know, sort of inclusive small business in some of the industries that we've already been in. So we've covered veterinarians and pharmacists and funeral home directors, and how do we find more underserved communities in those groups. And so that's sort of a separate initiative. But here in Wilmington, it's really focused on this sort of resource center that we're going to be opening up here, I think, in the next couple months. The second piece of it that we've really been focused on is how do we access capital into the community, and really sort of separate from the charitable giving that people, you know, are so gracious with. but how do we actually look at people, institutions, endowments, capital, the investing capital, and how do we take that on a social and impact-driven basis on a local level? So we've worked a lot with Cape Fear Collective on setting up a data backbone and being able to show some of the how the data science can actually influence where that capital goes. And so we put some money into an investment in affordable housing. There's a lot of work going around that. And then following up with workforce development, small business and transportation as well. So how do we actually source a local and in some sense, it'll be national capital on a localized level with an impact sort of driven.
So Huntley, let me ask you as our representative of corporate America here on the stage today, why have you personally or as a company, why does business pour so much resources into this or so much discussion this past year? Is it just social impact good? Is there a business argument to be made? What's the motivation? Yeah,
look, I think you've seen this across corporate America. If you read, Jamie Dimon's shareholder letter from JP Morgan, it's a great read through how companies have more than just an obligation for profits, right, for the bottom line. And it's a very long-term view. And if you take a long-term view, especially as a bank, you need economic prosperity. And if 20% of the population is meaningfully below sort of income levels, job creation, et cetera, you raise that up and we have massive growth. And this community can see that's increases in jobs, wealth, taxes, infrastructure, education, housing, the entire thing, right? So, Spence said it really well at the beginning. You should lift all these boats up. And I think a lot of companies have recognized over the last number of years, but especially in the last really kind of 12 to 18 months through pandemic and I think some spotlights on racial inequality, that we can play a really meaningful role in doing that.
So just to stick with the funding theme, Mayor Saffo, we were just talking about affordable housing as well. What's the city doing on that front? I believe there's money in the budget this year to address that as well, and possibly federal funding from the CARES Act coming to address that too, right?
That's correct. The city's always been involved in affordable housing. The city spends several $1 million a year in affordable housing through CDBG funding that we get from the federal government, partnering with what we are able to do locally from the city. But this is a huge initiative for this community. Obviously, Wilmington is one of the most popular cities in the country. We've got more demand than we have supply. Affordable housing is something that we've been talking about for quite some time. We're having some really focused and very good discussions with our county commissioners. Commissioner Rivenbark, Commissioner Saffo, Commissioner Hayes are also here. I know they've been very supportive of the affordable housing, and hopefully that we can come together and create hopefully a housing fund, a housing bond possibly. There's a lot of discussions about a lot of things in respect to affordable housing, but we're going to need affordable housing because we have a very large service sector economy here. And if you talk to a lot of small business owners here, they need housing for these folks to be able to get to and from work and not have to go all the way out into Pender into Brunswick County, which a lot of people are because of the affordable markets that are out there because of the land availability. So we're going to have to find ways to bring more affordable units into the marketplace. And that's going to be a commitment of money and time. And obviously, hopefully working with the private sector to be able to accommodate that and also working with the public. I hear a lot of support about affordable housing, but when you get out and you start voting on these issues in different neighborhoods, you'd be surprised how many neighborhood advocates, the NIMBY effect comes out and says, I don't want it in my backyard for whatever known reason. So for those advocates of affordable housing, whether you're in the public or private sector, or you're an advocate in any way, shape, or form, you need to make certain that you're supportive of your county commissioners and your city councils when we take these tough votes, because the neighborhoods will come out. It's unfortunate, but that's just the reality of what we see when we're at the dais with people that says, I don't want it in my backyard. So it's a very important issue for our community.
And Linda, just to round out this idea of economic equality, the county, I think even predating when you started on, had a goal in terms of minority and women-owned businesses as vendors. Why is that a focus or a goal? And just in general, how does that tie into the idea of diversity and inclusion and improving race relations in the area?
Well, it makes business sense. And the businesses we do, the businesses we work with and the demographics certainly should be reflective of our population. And so New Hanover County made a big push to increase the number of minority and women-owned businesses we do businesses with. And we increased our spending by 146%. That's pretty good. And so in the last couple of years, we have made it an effort to find those minority and women-owned businesses that may not think they're a good partner for New Hanover County. And we've now helped them to navigate the system, to come in and learn how to register their businesses, and to certainly talk with them about how to be good business partners. So this has been important for us. I think that there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think they appreciate it. We encourage our department heads and our managers throughout the county who are doing business and hiring vendors to look on our listing so that we can make sure that we're trying to disperse the monies equitably throughout the enterprise. And so it's been important to us to be able to do key business with those populations.
Linda, you lived in this community for about 40 years. Your previous job before the county was with the Wilmington Police Department for many, many years. So you have a lot of ties in the community, and you've heard a lot of conversations from all sides. I'm just curious from your perspective, do you think communications in this area around race and around issues around race, have they improved over the years? Is there still a long ways to go? What's your perspective on where you think the conversation stands here?
I think that people are thirsty and they want to have the conversation, but they're afraid. Having a conversation about race is like the elephant in the room. It's there and nobody wants to challenge it. And I think that when people realize it's okay to have the conversation, it's not going to kill you. And that's one of the things our office has been working towards, trying to educate the community. We launched our race and social justice circles back in February. We had 4 sessions of them. It was incredible the number of people who wanted to be a part of the conversation. And so what we're learning, when we put a facilitator, somebody who's more than qualified to help navigate the conversation, the walls can come down. And now we can begin to talk honestly about our perceptions, our misinformation, things we know, things we don't know about race. And then we begin to realize that race really isn't that important. It's a concept that we made up that has taken over our country. And so the more we begin to talk about it, the more comfortable we'll become about who we are and what we can do together.
Mayor Saffo, what are the kinds of things that you have heard people discussing or people have talked to you about in the past year?
Well, it all depends on what color glasses you wear. Everybody looks at it from a different perspective, from the neighborhood, from their churches, from the organizations they belong to, from the clubs they frequent. If you talk to some people, they think that we've made tremendous progress with race. You talk to another group of people, they say we have made no progress at all. I think, to Linda's point, getting to know one another, I've said this many times, this is probably a much more diverse community than when I grew up here, but we're also more segregated than we've ever been also because of where we live. And if you look at your neighborhood and you look around, the people that you live, that's primarily who you talk to and the perceptions that they might have and the historic biases that they might have comes through. And so I think to Lynn's point, the more that we can talk as people, whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you're Hispanic, whether you're gay, whatever the case is, I think it breaks down that barriers because as Mrs. Todd said, I think in the conversation that I had with her, she was asked the question is, what do you people want? And she returned the comment with, what do you want? And whatever you want is what we want. We all want the same thing. We want a good house. We want a good neighborhood, safe. We want our children to be able to go to good schools and get good jobs and live in this community in peace and harmony. I think we all want the same thing, but we look at it from a different perspective. And I think that we need to have much better conversations. And I do remember in the 60s when I was going to school here and we desegregated the schools and I was going to an all-white school at the time, and you get to meet people from other parts of the community or other parts of town, and you realize they're the same as you. And whatever things that you've heard before you got to know those folks, it's all broken down because now you know them, you have a personal relationship with them, you understand who they are and where they're coming from. And I've had a much greater learning experience, even being the mayor of the city, talking to different groups and different people. And what I have learned and what I've picked up and what I thought that, was maybe a historic bias that I picked up over the years, I got a better understanding of where people were coming from. I think that's what it comes down to, is just getting to know one another and having that conversation. And it's very difficult to do, because since we don't live in the same neighborhoods, how do you get together and have these conversations is extremely important. And I challenge any organizations, churches, civic organizations, whatever it is, when we can come together and talk like this, it's a good thing for this community and it's a great thing for this country.
So when you think of conversations from the business perspective, Huntley, you mentioned the ideas roundtable. What was that? And then what's come out of it?
Yeah, so, and a couple people here in the room were part of forming that. The idea was, no pun intended, to get a group of businesses together to just start talking about issues and what do we see, and whether it's about recruiting or about procurement or about all sorts of things. How do we just better each other? And, in a community, to Bill's point, that is relatively segregated, how do we help people feel comfortable? And so we've had, affinity groups that have gotten together with other affinity groups at other companies. And now you start to share that and you start to have just flow of information and best practices. So it's really been a positive sort of group that's gotten together. And again, back to this notion that we are better companies, we're a better community when we have discussions, when we have idea sharing across, the diversity of all sorts of thought and backgrounds and the like. So that was really the genesis of it, which happened probably 2 years ago now. And it's been quite successful. Interestingly, I think over the course of the last year, that group has been re-energized and it has taken on probably a whole new life with everything that's been going on.
And so when you say companies, you mean local employers?
Sure.
Some local
So
companies.
PPD, Encino, hospital, down west, there's probably 25 companies.
Okay. And so does that help, or does that combine with other things you guys might be doing in terms of recruitment for employees? I know, and diverse employees.
Yeah.
I'm going to point to Tracy Jackson, I think was up on stage and did a similar TED Talk a couple years ago here with us about that very issue in terms of African-American professional workers in Wilmington and whether it's difficult or not to recruit people to move here.
I think it's part of it. It definitely is a piece, and it has been hard. And we were having a conversation with someone recently who said that she was here in the community, and when she would have a very bright young person, she would encourage them to leave, to go to Atlanta, to go to Charlotte, to go somewhere out of Wilmington. This is date back 20 years ago. And now she's back to encouraging them here to be in the community and to be leaders and to actually drive growth. We and others, I think, have done a reasonable job as it relates to entry-level positions. So hiring out of HBCUs, and that has gone well. The more experienced hires have been more difficult, and we all need to be more committed and intentional about it. But it is nice when you start to have a little bit of momentum around some of these things. There's a tipping point that I think we can reach and that we're trying to.
So it sounds like there's a lot of similar initiatives or work being done both in the public sector and, Huntley, as you outline, amongst your organization, but also other major employers in the area. How much cross communication or work is being done between the business community and the public sector on these things?
Every damn day.
Yeah.
We got work every day. We work with the private sector every day. And then that Huntley's organization, Live Oak, has been a tremendous community company that has given back to this community over the last couple of years in great ways. And one of the initiatives that we're working on, the city, the county, Live Oak Bank, is the Wi-Fi. Is access to Wi-Fi. We have people in our community, we have kids in our community that are trying to learn and have no accessibility to Wi-Fi. In the 21st century, that's difficult. And this initiative that we're all working together on to try to break down the digital divide is a serious one, not only for the urban areas of our state and our country, but also in the rural communities that are also dealing with this issue. So that's an initiative that we're all working together on. Affordable housing, lots of things, nonprofit organizations that you folks support, and other organizations and companies here in the community that support a lot of the nonprofits that help in a lot of different ways in our community. So it's every day we're working with the private sector to figure out ways that we can partner together to deliver services and to deliver ways that our people feel engaged and feel that they can achieve in this community. And we want our young people to stay here. And Dr. Faust had made a comment that we're investing $10,000, all of us are, in every student in this community. And what a tragedy it is to send them off to school and not have them want to come back to the city where we're investing in their education. We should want those kids and those young people that want to say, I'm coming back home to Wilmington, open up a business or do something here in town, as opposed to going to Raleigh or Charlotte or Atlanta, wherever. I want them back here. They grew up here. This is a great community. This is a great area. Why shouldn't they come back here? So the more we can do to improve that, the better off we all are.
And we certainly are working, and we've got to have jobs to bring them back to. We do. We've got to have good paying jobs to make sure that they can come back to this area. It was amazing to me when our office opened, how many businesses reached out to us wanting to find out what we were going to be doing and how they could partner with us. So there is a partnership, a public-private partnership when it comes to working and doing the work of diversity and equity.
Are you, excuse me, Linda, are you guys still doing implicit bias training in the business community as well? Or is that just with the county?
We are doing it whenever they call. We're certainly continuing to complete all of our training for all of our employees. I've actually been in conversation with the city of Wilmington's HR department. We've had companies, Cameron Arts Museum called us yesterday. So if your organization, company needs implicit bias training, and it's something you'd like to be able to take your staff through, please give us a call. We'll be more than glad to partner with you.
And I just want to make another point. Years ago, the Chamber of Commerce put an initiative out called Cape Fear Future, for those of you that remember that. And I remember Richard Florida in this very room had indicated how important it was that we are a community that embraces people from all walks of life. Because as a company like Huntley's that is recruiting people from all over the country, Corning, PPD, the companies that are here that are recruiting, those folks that want to relocate here to Wilmington, these young people that want to relocate, have got to feel confident and comfortable that the community that they're relocating to is inclusive. And it's as much a part of economic prosperity as anything that you can think of. And so if you're trying to hire, let's just say, an engineer from India or somebody from Greece or somebody from another part of the world, they've got to feel comfortable in the place that they're moving to. And I can just, from the experience that I have just as a son of an immigrant, those people wanted to come to this community because they saw other people that looked like them, that prayed like them, that ate the same food as them, and they felt comfortable in coming here and establishing a foothold here and starting their businesses here. So if you can create that here and keep that here, then you're going to be able to recruit a lot of people into this community. If you don't, they're not going to come. And those companies that are here are going to say, you know what, it's hard for me to recruit here in Wilmington. I'm going to go somewhere else where I can recruit, where people are accepted. It's a very important economic development issue for our community.
Mayor Saffo, do you think then, from the city's perspective, from the county's perspective, do you have any tools or ideas about how you can incentivize that from the public end, or is that solely going to rest on the shoulders of the private companies like Huntley?
Well, I think an opportunity that the city has and the county is that when we do incentivize companies that do come here, that do take public money from the public to come here and relocate here, I think that there will be a discussion as to how many people in that will be hired from, first of all, from within the community, and what does that workforce look like going forward. I think that's going to be a discussion, a topic of discussion that we will be having that should be had, because we are investing public money, your money. And if we're going to be investing public money, it should reflect what the community looks like and make sure we have diversity in it.
And another way, I believe, that we retain people, professionals from all backgrounds in our community, is the way we respond to our community. I'm reminded of the tragedies that happened this past weekend. 7 people shot, 3 dead, 4 injured. Down at the beach, 2 people dead jumping out of a condo, 2 injured. People watch the way we respond to trauma in our community. And so it's concerning that there wasn't much of a response to the community that these individuals were shot in. A lot of those people in those neighborhoods were victims. They were minding their business in their houses. But the next day, things were back to normal as if nothing had happened. And they were in shock. We respond to fires differently than we respond to shootings. The people who had the fire got Red Cross, all the resources. The people who had to maneuver and navigate the shooting in the inner city got nothing until some folks decided to come together and try to offer them trauma response. And so we've got to make sure that the way we're responding to trauma and crisis in our community is equitable, so that when people see it anywhere in the county, that they know those individuals, regardless of what color they are, what neighborhood they live in, they're going to get an equitable response from all of us.
And Huntley, just to finish us off on this part of the discussion. So when you think about response and next steps, whether it be from Live Oak's perspective or how you feel the business community might want to respond and looking forward, kind of leave us with a thought of what do you see happening going forward, and what is the next part of this conversation?
I mean, look, I'm excited as I sit here and energized by these conversations and conversations that I have at our company and in the community. I spent a long time in New York City working, and it is so big and the problem is so massive that it's hard to think that anything that you or I or anybody can do can actually move that needle. But you come here and you look at, we put money into and we bought 20 houses, and I've already heard 2 stories of individual families that came through and whatever that are in that home now that we've been able to renovate and lower the rent and work towards permanent ownership of those homes. And that's without trying, those things just make their way back and you feel that sort of impact. So I think it's just more, right? It is just more of everything that we're doing. There is no one answer. It's more housing, it's more education, it's more jobs, it's more small businesses, it's more everything that we do, it's more partnerships. And I think if there's one thing that we've heard today from multiple things, it's just that awareness and that intentionality about this will move us all forward. And so, everybody just get involved and just keep doing more, and we're going to get there.
Vicki, one thing I also want to point out too, in regards to business, and I'm on the film commission, and the film companies, the production companies that are looking to do filming here in Wilmington, not only Wilmington, but the entire state of North Carolina, are going to be looking at the crews to determine, to make certain that those crew base reflect diversity. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be working with the county and working with Johnny Griffin, the film commission, to make certain that we have opportunities, and maybe Genesis Block over there, opportunities for young people that want to get in the film industry, film business, to be able to get the training necessary, because they will not come here if our crew base does not reflect diversity. They've already told us that. Disney, Paramount, every one of them are saying that. So you can see the transformational changes taking place in business alone. And I'm hearing it not only in the film industry, I'm hearing it in every business. And I know you folks are looking at it too. So to me, this is the second civil rights movement. And it's as much about inclusiveness and diversity, but it's also about economy and business and making sure that we have the economics that has really been a great divide in this country for many, many years. And I think that's one of the last pieces that really needs to be focused on and worked on.
That's interesting. So obviously this is a topic that we could dive into for hours and hours more. And I know we've said the word conversation about 20 times up here, but the conversation does continue. And it continues with our coverage as well, in the Business Journal and in the Business Magazine, and also on our weekly Biz Talks, where we actually over the past year have delved into a lot of these topics and with many of these speakers. So I encourage you to check those out. Thank you for all those who came out today. Thank you for all those who are watching us online or on your TV for joining in today's conversation on all these topics. And also just wanted to point out before we part ways today, next Power Breakfast will be held in June. And as Spence mentioned earlier, we have been trying to be nimble all year long. And so we'll share details with what that looks like and where we are at that point. But thank you to everybody and for sharing all of your ideas and thoughts with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.